Millionaire CEO didn't know he had a child until a humble mother brought her 6-year-old daughter to a job interview. The little girl ran to hug him and said 3 words that broke his heart. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The morning sun filtered through worn curtains as Melissa Parker rushed around her small apartment. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder with each passing minute, a constant reminder that she was running late. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day of her interview at Reed Enterprises, a position that could finally turn their financial situation around. "Sophie, honey, have you brushed your teeth?" she called out, frantically buttoning her only presentable blouse. The fabric was slightly faded from too many washes, but it was clean and professional enough. "Yes, Mommy," came a small voice from the bathroom, followed by the appearance of 6-year-old Sophie, her dark curls still tangled despite Melissa's earlier attempts to tame them. Melissa knelt down, quickly running a brush through her daughter's hair one more time. "Remember, Mrs. Jenkins will be here any minute to watch you while I go to my interview." Sophie's green eyes, startlingly bright and expressive, looked up at her mother. "Can't I come with you? I'll be super quiet. I promise." "Not today, sweetie. This is a very important meeting." Melissa tucked a strand of hair behind Sophie's ear, marveling as she often did at those remarkable eyes, so like her late friend Rebecca's. The phone rang, interrupting their moment. Melissa's heart sank as she listened to Mrs. Jenkins apologizing, explaining that she had woken up with a terrible flu and couldn't possibly watch Sophie today. After hanging up, Melissa sat on the edge of the bed, mind racing. She had already rescheduled this interview once. Canceling again would surely cost her this opportunity, and they desperately needed the income. Their rent was already 2 weeks overdue. "Is everything okay, Mommy?" Sophie asked, climbing onto the bed beside her. Melissa forced a smile. "Change of plans, sweetie. Looks like you're coming with me after all." 30 minutes later, they stood before the towering glass headquarters of Reed Enterprises. The building seemed to touch the clouds, its sleek design intimidating in its perfection. Melissa squeezed Sophie's hand. "Remember what we talked about? You'll sit quietly in the waiting area with your coloring books. This is very important, Sophie." Sophie nodded solemnly. "I know, Mommy. I'll be good." As they entered the vast marble lobby, Melissa couldn't help feeling out of place. Executives in tailored suits strode purposefully across the floor, their leather shoes clicking confidently on the polished surface. She smoothed her second-hand skirt, wishing she had something better to wear. At the reception desk, a perfectly groomed woman looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning, how may I help you?" "Melissa Parker. I have an interview with Mr. Reed at 9:30. The receptionist's eyes flickered briefly to Sophie before returning to her computer. "Yes, Ms. Parker, however, I don't see a note about bringing a child to the interview." Melissa swallowed hard. "My babysitter canceled last minute. I assure you she'll be no trouble." After a moment's hesitation, the receptionist nodded and handed them visitor badges. 18th floor. Mr. Reed's assistant will meet you there." The elevator ride seemed endless, Sophie bouncing slightly on her heels with excitement while Melissa mentally rehearsed her responses to potential interview questions. When the doors finally opened, they were greeted by a sleek reception area with the Reed Enterprises logo prominently displayed on the wall. A young man in a crisp suit approached. "Ms. Parker, I'm James, Mr. Reed's executive assistant. Mr. Reed, we'll see you shortly." His gaze dropped to Sophie. "And who's this?" "This is my daughter, Sophie. My childcare fell through at the last minute." James frowned slightly. "Mr. Reed's schedule is extremely tight today. Children aren't typically allowed in executive interviews." "Please," Melissa said, lowering her voice. "I'm a single mother and I really need this job." She has coloring books and will be perfectly quiet in the waiting area. After a moment's consideration, James nodded. "Very well. Please have a seat. I'll come get you when Mr. Reed is ready." Melissa settled Sophie in a plush chair with her coloring book. "Remember, stay right here. Don't move until I come back." Sophie nodded, already opening her crayons. I promise, Mommy. 20 minutes later, James returned. Mr. Reed will see. You now, Miss Parker. With one last reassuring look at Sophie, who was contentedly coloring, Melissa followed James down a corridor to a large corner office. The view of the city was breathtaking, but Melissa barely noticed it, her attention immediately drawn to the man standing behind an imposing desk. Ethan Reed was taller than she expected, with dark hair perfectly styled and piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate her worth in seconds. His tailored navy suit probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Ms. Parker, he said, his voice deep and controlled. Please, have a seat. The interview began professionally enough. Ethan asked pointed questions about her experience, her skills, her reason for wanting to join Reed Enterprises. Melissa answered confidently, years of determination giving her strength despite her nervousness. Your resume shows a gap of almost 7 years. Ethan noted, looking up from the paper. Can you explain that? Yes, sir. I became the guardian of my daughter after her birth and chose to work freelance positions that allowed me to be home with her. Now that she's in school, I'm eager to return to full-time work. Ethan seemed about to ask another question when the office door suddenly burst open. Sophie stood there, her coloring book clutched in one hand, having escaped the receptionist who now appeared behind her, apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry, Mr. Reed. She slipped away when I was answering a call, but neither Ethan nor Melissa heard the rest of the explanation, because at that moment, Sophie's eyes locked onto Ethan's face. The little girl froze, her mouth forming, a perfect O of surprise. Then, inexplicably, her face lit up with pure joy. Daddy, she cried out, dropping her coloring book and running straight toward Ethan. Daddy, it's you. The room went completely still. Melissa felt the blood drain from her face as Sophie threw her arms around a shocked Ethan Reed's legs. For his part, Ethan stood rigid, staring down at the child with an expression of complete disbelief. When he finally looked up at Melissa, his eyes had turned cold as ice. What? He said in a dangerously quiet voice. Is the meaning of this? Ethan's eyes hardened as he stared at Melissa over Sophie's head. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them favorable. The timing, just weeks before his merger announcement and months before his wedding to Victoria, seemed calculated. Ms. Parker, he said, voice dangerously controlled. I'd appreciate an explanation. Now. Melissa stood frozen, as shocked as Ethan by Sophie's outburst. I don't know why she said that. Sophie, honey, come here. Sophie clung tighter to Ethan's legs. But Mommy, it's him. From the picture. The receptionist silently backed out, closing the door behind her, leaving them in suffocating privacy. Melissa's heart pounded. Sophie, please come here, she pleaded, moving forward to gently pry her daughter away. Sophie reluctantly let go, but her eyes remained fixed on Ethan. You look just like the man in Mommy's special box. Ethan's jaw tightened. He studied Sophie's face, and something in her features, particularly those striking green eyes, triggered a distant memory. Green eyes he'd once looked into every day. Rebecca's eyes. The door swung open again and a striking woman in designer clothing entered. Darling, I thought we'd do lunch before my... Victoria Blackwell stopped mid-sentence, taking in the scene before her. What's going on? She asked, her perfectly shaped eyebrows drawing together. Apparently, Ethan said coldly, I'm being introduced to my daughter. Victoria's gaze sharpened. Excuse me? Melissa shook her head desperately. No, there's been a misunderstanding. I came for an interview. I don't know why Sophie said that. Victoria's lips curved into a disbelieving smile. How convenient. An interview that turns into a paternity claim. It's not like that, Melissa insisted, drawing Sophie close. I'm sorry for the confusion, Mr. Reed. We should go. Not so fast, Ethan said, stepping around his desk. Your daughter seems convinced I'm her father. That's quite an accusation. Victoria placed a possessive hand on Ethan's arm. Darling, this is obviously a ploy. The timing is suspect given the merger announcement next week. Melissa felt heat rising to her cheeks. I didn't know anything about you before applying for this job. I certainly didn't know what you looked like. Then, explain why your daughter recognized me, Ethan demanded. Sophie looked up. He looks like the man in the picture with Aunt Rebecca. At the name, Ethan visibly flinched. Rebecca? Rebecca Jensen? The room seemed to tilt beneath Melissa's feet. You knew Rebecca? Answer my question first, Ethan countered. Victoria interjected. This is ridiculous. We should call security. No, Ethan said sharply. I want answers. He knelt to Sophie's eye level. Who is Rebecca to you? Before Sophie could answer, Melissa spoke. She was my best friend, Sophie's biological mother. The color drained from Ethan's face as he stared into Sophie's green eyes, Rebecca's eyes. Rising slowly, he turned to Victoria. Give us a moment. Ethan, you can't be serious. Please, Victoria. After Victoria reluctantly left, Ethan faced Melissa. I want a DNA test, today. The words hit Melissa like a physical blow. Mr. Reed, I didn't come here for anything but a job. I didn't even know you knew Rebecca. Yet here we are, he said coldly. My legal team will be in touch this afternoon. I suggest you make yourself available. You can't just demand, I can and I will. His voice left no room for argument. If there's even a possibility that child is mine, I need to know. Back in her small apartment, Melissa's hands trembled as she made Sophie a sandwich. The morning's events replayed in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Mommy, are you mad at me? Sophie's small voice broke through her thoughts. Melissa turned, forcing a gentle smile. No, sweetie, I'm not mad, but I need to understand what happened. Why did you call that man Daddy? Sophie fidgeted with her sandwich. He looks exactly like the man in the picture with Aunt Rebecca, the one you keep in your special box. Melissa's heart sank. She'd been so careful to keep that photo hidden. You went through my things? I didn't mean to, Sophie said, eyes welling with tears. I was looking for the stickers you promised, and I found the box under your bed. Melissa sat down heavily. The wooden box contained her few keepsakes of Rebecca, including the single photograph she had of Rebecca with Ethan Reed, though she'd never known his name. Rebecca had only referred to him as the one who got away. Sophie, that doesn't mean he's your father. But you said my daddy is in heaven with Aunt Rebecca. The lie she'd told to simplify things for a 4-year-old now came back to haunt her. It's complicated, sweetie. The doorbell rang, interrupting them. Melissa opened the door to find a stern-faced woman in a business suit. Miss Parker, I'm Amanda Wells, legal counsel for Reed Enterprises. She handed Melissa an envelope. These are consent forms for DNA testing. A car is waiting to take you to the lab. Melissa glanced at Sophie, who was watching curiously from the kitchen doorway. I need time to process this. Mr. Reed is offering a generous stipend for your cooperation today. Amanda's voice lowered. Or we can pursue this through formal legal channels. The implicit threat hung in the air. With mounting bills and an eviction notice looming, Melissa had little choice. 20 minutes later, they sat in a private medical facility, Sophie coloring quietly while a technician prepared to take DNA samples. Across the room, Ethan stood with his arms crossed, face impassive. When he approached, Sophie smiled tentatively. Are you really my daddy? Ethan's stern expression faltered. That's what we're here to find out. Melissa intervened. Sophie, this doesn't mean... Actually, Ethan cut in, I'd like a word with Ms. Parker. Alone. In a small consultation room, Ethan closed the door. I want the truth. All of it. Melissa met his gaze steadily. Rebecca was my best friend since college. She died in childbirth. I adopted Sophie as I promised her I would. And the father? Rebecca never told me his name. Just that he was ambitious, driven, and chose his career over her. Ethan's jaw tightened. Rebecca and I dated for 18 months. She ended things when I expanded the company internationally. She never contacted me about a pregnancy. She wouldn't have wanted to burden you. Melissa said softly. She knew your ambitions were elsewhere. So instead she left me with a daughter I never knew existed? Anger flashed in his eyes. She was protecting Sophie from feeling unwanted. And now you're here, coincidentally applying for a job at my company? I had no idea who you were until today, Melissa insisted. I'm not after your money, Mr. Reed. I came for a job because I need to support my daughter. If the test proves she's my daughter, Ethan said coldly, we'll have a very different conversation about exactly what you're entitled to. As they returned to the waiting room, Melissa noticed a text notification on her phone. An eviction warning. The irony wasn't lost on her. Standing in a room with a billionaire while facing homelessness, the technician approached with swabs. We'll have preliminary results in 48 hours. 2 days that would change everything. Victoria paced Ethan's penthouse living room, her heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. This is clearly a ploy to extort money from you. The timing is too perfect with the merger announcement next week. Ethan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city skyline. The events of the day had left him shaken, though he'd never admit it aloud. You didn't see her eyes, Victoria, he said quietly. They're exactly like Rebecca's. Victoria stopped pacing. So she has green eyes. That proves nothing. Millions of people have green eyes. Not like these. He turned to face her. And the photo Sophie mentioned. A photo can be manipulated. This Melissa woman could have planned this for months. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. To what end? Apply for an entry-level position and hope her daughter recognizes me from a photo? For $20 million, people have concocted far more elaborate schemes, Victoria replied, referencing his net worth as reported in last month's Forbes. His phone buzzed with a text from his private investigator. Background report on Melissa Parker ready. Sending now. Minutes later, Ethan was reading through the detailed report. Melissa Parker, 32. Bachelor's degree in business administration. Former marketing coordinator until 6 years ago when she suddenly switched to freelance work. No criminal record. Currently 3 weeks behind on rent for a small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood. Multiple small loans. No suspicious financial transactions or unexplained income. She's drowning in debt, Ethan murmured. Victoria peered over his shoulder. Perfect motive for a con. Or she's genuinely struggling as a single mother. Ethan couldn't shake the memory of Sophie's face lighting up when she saw him. That wasn't rehearsed. It was pure, genuine recognition. The next morning, unable to concentrate at work, Ethan made an impulsive decision. He had his driver take him to the address from the report, a worn apartment building far from his usual haunts. He watched from his car as Melissa emerged with Sophie, both bundled against the morning chill. There was no pretense in how Melissa knelt to fix Sophie's scarf, or the loving way she brushed hair from the girl's face. They walked to a nearby bus stop, Melissa checking her watch anxiously. Later that day, his lawyer called. The preliminary DNA results are in. Would you like me to email them or deliver in person? Email them, Ethan said, heart pounding. The attachment took seconds to download but felt like hours. He read the results twice, then sat back in his chair, the world tilting beneath him. 9% probability of paternity. Sophie was his daughter. His phone rang again. Victoria. He let it go to voicemail. His mind raced through implications. A child. His child. A daughter he never knew existed, being raised in near poverty while he lived in luxury. He called his lawyer back. Draw up papers. I want to establish paternity rights, visitation, child, support, everything. And Ms. Parker? Ethan paused. Set up a meeting, tomorrow. Both legal teams present. That evening, as Victoria discussed wedding plans, Ethan remained distant, his thoughts on a little girl with green eyes who had recognized him instantly. Are you even listening? Victoria demanded. I'm sorry. What were you saying? She studied his face. The test results came back, didn't they? What did they show? Ethan met her gaze directly. She's mine, Victoria. Sophie is my daughter. Victoria's expression hardened. This changes everything. Yes, Ethan agreed, though they likely meant very different things. It does. He's here, Melissa whispered to herself as the sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building. She'd been watching from the window since dawn, unable to sleep after receiving the DNA results and meeting request. Sophie looked up from her cereal. Who's here, Mommy? No one, sweetie. Mrs. Wilson from next door will watch you for a couple hours while I go to a meeting. Sophie pouted. Is it about the man from your interview? The one with my eyes? Melissa's heart clenched. She still hadn't found the right words to explain this situation to her daughter. Yes, it's about him. We need to talk about some grown-up things. After settling Sophie with their elderly neighbor, Melissa descended to meet Ethan. She'd chosen her most professional outfit, a simple navy dress that had seen better days but was still presentable. Ethan stood beside his car, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. His face betrayed nothing as she approached. Ms. Parker, he said formally. Mr. Reed. She matched his tone. The drive to his lawyer's office was silent and tense. Melissa stared out the window, acutely aware of the vast difference between their worlds. They might share a connection through Sophie, but everything else about them existed in different universes. The law firm occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise. In a conference room with panoramic views, two lawyers waited with documents arranged in precise stacks. Let's get straight to the point, said Ethan's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Gloria Winters. These papers establish Mr. Reed's paternity, writes and outline a proposed arrangement for custody, visitation, and financial support. Melissa's court-appointed attorney, a young man who seemed overwhelmed by the surroundings, reviewed the documents carefully. This is extremely generous, he said, eyebrows rising at the figures. Melissa leaned forward. May I see? The child. Support arrangement would not only cover all of Sophie's needs but included funds for a new apartment in a better neighborhood, educational expenses through college, and a separate account for Melissa's inconvenience. She looked up at Ethan, who watched her with an unreadable expression. Why? She's my daughter, he said simply. I take care of what's mine. Something in his phrasing made Melissa bristle. Sophie isn't a possession. Obviously. But she deserves the benefits of my name and resources. And what about you? What role do you want in her life? Ethan cleared his throat. I've arranged for standard visitation, every other weekend, alternating holidays. So she becomes another appointment in your calendar? Melissa couldn't keep the edge from her voice. His eyes narrowed. I'm trying to do the right thing here. The right thing for whom? For Sophie, for your conscience, or for your public image? Gloria interrupted smoothly. Perhaps we should take a brief recess. Once alone with Melissa, her attorney whispered urgently, This is an incredibly favorable settlement. I strongly advise you to accept it. Melissa stared out at the city below. He talks about her like she's a business transaction. Ms. Parker, forgive me, but you're in no position to walk away from this offer. The truth of those words stung. Last night she'd found a final eviction notice on her door. She had less than a week to come up with back rent. When they reconvened, Ethan spoke directly to Melissa. I understand your concerns, but Sophie is my child, and I intend to be part of her life. These terms are non-negotiable. Melissa met his gaze. I want one addition. Before any visitation begins, you spend time getting to know her gradually. No overnight stays until she's comfortable with you. Ethan considered this. Reasonable. We'll add it to the agreement. As she signed the papers, Melissa felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. Sophie would have security now, but at what? Emotional cost? When do you want to meet her? She asked quietly. Today, Ethan replied without hesitation. I've waited 6 years without knowing she existed. I don't want to wait another day. Sophie twirled in her favorite purple dress, excitement bubbling through her as Melissa brushed her hair. Is he really coming to see me? Just me? Yes, honey. Mr. Reed wants to spend some time with you. Melissa worked to keep her voice neutral, hiding her own anxiety behind a smile. Because he's my daddy? The direct question caught Melissa off guard. Yes, she finally admitted. The test showed he is your biological father. Sophie's face lit up. I knew it. He looks just like in the picture with Aunt Rebecca. Will he live with us now? No, sweetie. He has his own home, but he wants to be part of your life. Melissa secured Sophie's hair with a ribbon, her mind racing with concerns about how this would affect her daughter emotionally. A knock at the door sent Sophie racing across the apartment. Melissa caught her just before she could fling it open. Remember what we talked about? Take it slow. When she opened the door, Ethan stood there looking uncharacteristically uncertain, a large gift bag in his hand. His usual commanding presence seemed softened somehow. Hello, he said, his eyes immediately finding Sophie, who peeked from behind Melissa. Hi, Sophie replied shyly, a complete change from her earlier excitement. Melissa invited him in, painfully aware of how their modest apartment must look to someone accustomed to penthouses and executive suites. Ethan surveyed the space quickly, his expression unreadable. I brought something for you, Sophie, he said, offering the bag. Sophie looked to Melissa, who nodded encouragingly. Inside was a beautiful teddy bear, wearing a small lab coat and stethoscope. Your mother mentioned you want to be a doctor someday, Ethan explained. Sophie's eyes widened. How did you know that's my favorite animal? Lucky guess, he said, but his glance at Melissa betrayed that he'd done his homework. The afternoon progressed with surprising ease. Ethan sat on the floor with Sophie, admiring her drawings and asking thoughtful questions about her interests. Melissa watched from the kitchen, preparing snacks while observing their interaction. There was an undeniable physical resemblance between them. The same shaped eyebrows, the same slight dimple when they smiled. Do you have a swimming pool? Sophie asked suddenly. Ethan looked amused. I do, actually. Mommy says we can't afford swimming lessons, but I really want to learn. Melissa felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Perhaps we could arrange lessons, Ethan said carefully, looking to Melissa for approval. Before she could respond, Sophie continued her innocent interrogation. Do you have a wife? My friend Zoe has a mom and a dad who live in different houses, but they both come to her school plays. I'm not married, Ethan replied, but I am engaged. Her name is Victoria. Will she be my stepmom? An uncomfortable silence fell. Melissa stepped in. Sophie, that's enough questions for now. Why don't you show Mr. Reed your science project? Later, when Sophie went to her room to fetch her favorite books, Ethan approached Melissa in the kitchen. She's remarkable, he said quietly. Smart, curious, confident. She is, Melissa agreed, unable to keep the pride from her voice. You've done an incredible job raising her. The unexpected compliment caught her off guard. Thank you. I've been thinking about the custody arrangement, Ethan continued. I'd like to amend it to include regular dinner visits during the week, not just weekends. I want to be involved in the day-to-day, not just special occasions. Melissa studied his face, searching for ulterior motives but finding only sincerity. Sophie would like that. As Ethan prepared to leave, Sophie suddenly hugged him. Will you come back tomorrow? Ethan hesitated, clearly moved by the gesture. I have meetings, but I'll come the day after. Promise? I promise. After he left, Melissa found Sophie sitting with her new teddy bear, a thoughtful expression on her young face. Mommy, I like him, but he seems sad sometimes. Melissa smiled softly. Growing up is complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes people can be happy and sad at the same time. Like discovering you have a daughter, she thought, or sharing the child you've raised alone. Victoria slammed the glossy wedding magazine shut, startling the event planner who'd been pointing out reception venues. He's spending time with them again tonight? Her assistant nodded nervously. Mr. Reed canceled your dinner reservation at Le Cirque. He said to reschedule for next week. It was the third cancellation in 2 weeks since Ethan had discovered Sophie's existence. Victoria dismissed the planner with a wave of her hand and poured herself a generous glass of wine. The penthouse phone rang. "Victoria, it's Diana Reed." Victoria grimaced. Ethan's mother. "Diana, how lovely to hear from you. What's this I'm hearing about Ethan canceling our family dinner on Sunday, and rumors about a child?" The society pages are whispering. Victoria paced the living room. "It's complicated. Ethan recently discovered he has a 6-year-old daughter from a previous relationship." The silence on the other end was deafening. "A child? And you didn't think to call me immediately with this information?" Diana's voice had turned to ice. Ethan wanted to handle it privately first. "I assume he's verified paternity?" DNA confirmed. "The child is living with her guardian. Her biological mother died in childbirth." Diana's tone became calculating. "I see. And this guardian, what's her angle?" "She claims she wants nothing but for Sophie to know her father." "Everyone wants something, Victoria. Find out what it is." The line went dead. Across town, Ethan sat at Melissa's modest kitchen table, helping Sophie with her math homework while Melissa prepared dinner. The domestic scene felt surprisingly natural. "You're really good at math," Sophie said, looking up at him with admiration. "I've always liked numbers. They make sense even when people don't." Melissa set a simple pasta dish on the table. "Dinner's ready." As they ate, Sophie chattered about school and friends, occasionally asking Ethan questions about his childhood. He answered carefully, conscious of the vast difference between his privileged upbringing and Sophie's more modest life. "Can I come see where you work sometime?" Sophie asked. Ethan glanced at Melissa. "If your mother approves." "Perhaps during a school holiday," Melissa suggested, though the thought of returning to Reed Enterprises made her uneasy. After Sophie went to bed, Ethan lingered. "Thank you for tonight," Melissa nodded, gathering dishes. "Sophie enjoys your visits. And you? How do you feel about all this?" She paused, surprised by the personal question. "Honestly, I'm still adjusting. Everything's changing so quickly. I've been meaning to discuss the housing situation." Ethan leaned against the counter. "This neighborhood isn't ideal for Sophie. I've found a condo in a good school district." "We don't need your charity," Melissa interrupted. "It's not charity. It's providing for my daughter. By uprooting her from everything familiar." Ethan's phone buzzed with a text. His expression darkened as he read it. "I need to go. There's an issue at the office." After he left, Melissa checked her email and found a message from a local reporter, seeking comment on your relationship with Ethan Reed and his newly discovered daughter. Deadline tomorrow. Panic surged through her. How had they found out? Meanwhile, Ethan confronted Victoria in his penthouse. "You leaked the story to the press? Don't be dramatic. I merely mentioned to Diana that you've been distracted with personal matters. And she went straight to her society friends." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. If you're going to be a father too..." "This child people will find out eventually. On my terms, not through gossip columns." Victoria stepped closer. "You've canceled our plans 5 times in 2 weeks. You're never home. What am I supposed to think? I'm trying to build a relationship with my daughter. And what about us? What about our wedding in 3 months? Your precious Sophie is taking over your entire life." Ethan met her gaze coolly. "She's my child, Victoria. She will always be a priority. Above me, above our future. If that's how you see it, perhaps we need to reconsider that future." The words hung between them like a gauntlet thrown. Outside, thunder rumbled as a storm approached, echoing the tension within. "Billionaire CEO discovers secret daughter," screamed the headline on the business section of the morning paper. Accompanying it was a grainy photo of Ethan exiting Melissa's apartment building, clearly taken with a telephoto lens from across the street. Melissa stared at the article in horror. The story painted her as a calculating single mother who had orchestrated a surprise reunion between Ethan and his unknown child just weeks before his high-profile wedding to socialite Victoria Blackwell. "Mommy, why is your picture in the newspaper?" Sophie asked, peering over Melissa's shoulder at the breakfast table. Melissa quickly folded the paper. It's nothing, sweetie. Go get your backpack for school. As soon as Sophie left the room, Melissa's phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. Have you seen it? He asked without preamble. Yes. It's horrible. They're making me sound like some kind of gold digger. My PR team is drafting a statement now. His voice was tight with controlled anger. I've also instructed my security team to keep reporters away from your apartment. Don't speak to anyone from the press. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Melissa said, fighting back tears. Sophie doesn't deserve to be tabloid fodder. I agree. That's why I'm sending a car for both of you. Pack enough for a few days. You can stay at my lake house until this dies down. Ethan, I can't just leave. Sophie has school date. It's Friday. She won't miss much. The media frenzy will only intensify if you stay there. His tone softened slightly. Please, Melissa. I want to protect both of you. 2 hours later, they were in Ethan's private car heading out of the city. Sophie was thrilled by the adventure, but Melissa felt uneasy. The driver took a circuitous route to avoid any following photographers. The lake house turned out to be a stunning modern mansion nestled among towering pines, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a pristine lake. Sophie ran from room to room in excitement while Melissa stood in the great room, feeling completely out of place among the designer furniture and original artwork. This place is amazing, Sophie exclaimed. Do you live here all the time? It's just a weekend retreat, Ethan explained, setting down their bags. I thought you might enjoy exploring the forest trails and the private beach. Melissa watched their interaction with mixed emotions. Despite her initial suspicions about Ethan's motives, she couldn't deny that he was making genuine efforts to connect with Sophie. The tenderness in his eyes when he looked at his daughter revealed a side of him the business world never saw. That evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep in one of the guest bedrooms, Melissa found Ethan on the deck, nursing a glass of scotch, as he stared out at the moonlit lake. Thank you for this, she said quietly, joining him at the railing. For getting us away from the chaos. It's my fault the chaos exists in the first place. He didn't look at her. My life has always been a public spectacle, but I never wanted that for Sophie. Or for you. Have you spoken to Victoria? Melissa asked carefully. A muscle tightened in his jaw. She's not pleased with the situation or the headlines. I can imagine. Ethan turned to face her. I need to know something, Melissa. Why did Rebecca never tell me about Sophie? We may have broken up, but I had a right to know I was going to be a father. Melissa sighed. Rebecca was diagnosed with a heart condition early in her pregnancy. The doctors warned her that carrying to term was dangerous, but she refused to terminate. She didn't want you to feel obligated to a baby you never asked for, especially when she might not survive to raise her. So instead she made a unilateral decision that kept me from my child for 6 years. The hurt in his voice was palpable. She thought she was protecting both of you. Melissa hesitated. Rebecca loved you, Ethan, even after you broke up. She kept that photo of you two until the day she died. The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken emotions. In the distance, a loon called out across the water, its mournful cry echoing the regret that hung in the air. I would have been there, Ethan finally said. If I had known. Melissa touched his arm gently. You're here now. That's what matters. Monday, morning arrived with cruel swiftness. Their peaceful weekend at the lake house felt like a dream as Ethan's driver returned them to the city. During those 3 days, Sophie had blossomed under Ethan's attention, fishing off the private dock, roasting marshmallows by the fire pit, and listening to his stories about building his company from nothing. Do we really have to go back? Sophie asked, her face pressed against the car window as the city skyline came into view. You have school, sweetheart, Melissa reminded her. And Mr. Reed, your father, has important meetings. The merger, Ethan said absently, scrolling through emails on his phone. The first time he'd mentioned work all weekend. When they arrived at Melissa's apartment building, a small group of reporters waited on the sidewalk. Ethan's security team created a protective barrier, ushering them quickly inside while deflecting questions. This is unacceptable, Ethan muttered, once they were safely in the apartment. I'm increasing security until this dies down. It will. Only make it more obvious, Melissa argued. More security means more attention. I won't compromise on Sophie's safety. His tone left no room for debate. After Ethan left for his office, promising to call later, Melissa received an unexpected text message from Victoria. We need to talk, alone. Le Méridien Hotel, 3 p.m. Melissa hesitated. Meeting Victoria seemed unwise, but ignoring her would only create more tension in an already complicated situation. After arranging for Sophie to go to a friend's house after school, she agreed. The hotel's upscale lounge was nearly empty when Melissa arrived. Victoria sat at a corner table, immaculately dressed in a cream designer suit that probably cost more than Melissa's monthly rent. 2 untouched martinis sat before her. Thank you for coming, Victoria said coolly. I thought we should get to know each other, given the circumstances. Melissa sat cautiously. I appreciate that. Let's be clear, Victoria continued, sliding 1 martini toward Melissa. I don't blame you for this situation. Rebecca made her choices and Ethan is dealing with the consequences. Sophie isn't a consequence, Melissa said sharply. She's a child who has significantly complicated our lives. Victoria took a deliberate sip. The merger announcement has been overshadowed by gossip. Our wedding plans are in disarray. Ethan's mother is beside herself. I'm sorry for the disruption, but I'm not finished, Victoria interrupted. I understand Sophie needs her father. What I don't understand is why that requires Ethan spending every free moment with you both. Melissa stiffened. I've never encouraged anything beyond co-parenting. Yet he came back from your little lake house getaway completely changed. Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her glass. He's postponed our wedding, planning meetings twice. That's between you and Ethan. Is it? Victoria withdrew an envelope from her purse. I'm prepared to offer you a very generous arrangement. Enough to relocate to a lovely home in any city of your choosing, preferably at some distance. Sophie would still see Ethan on holidays and summer breaks. Melissa stared at the envelope, in disbelief. You're trying to buy us off? I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone. Sophie gets financial security. You get a fresh start away from tabloid attention, and Ethan fulfills his paternal obligations without disrupting the life we've planned. Sophie needs her father in her daily life, not as a holiday visitor. Victoria's expression hardened. Consider carefully before rejecting my offer. Ethan built his empire through single-minded dedication. Do you really believe he'll maintain this enthusiastic father routine once the novelty wears off? Melissa stood abruptly. I think this conversation is over. One more thing, Victoria called as Melissa turned to leave. Ethan doesn't respond well to ultimatums or manipulation. Whatever influence you think you have over him, remember who he chose to build his future with. Outside, Melissa's phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Dinner tonight? I want to discuss school options for Sophie. She stared at the message, Victoria's warning echoing in her mind. Was she naive to believe Ethan's commitment would last? Or was Victoria simply desperate to maintain control? Either way, Sophie's heart hung in the balance of their decisions. Ethan arrived at Melissa's apartment that evening with a folder tucked under his arm. Sophie greeted him with an enthusiastic hug that still surprised him with its warmth, while Melissa offered a more reserved smile. I brought dinner, he said, holding up bags from an upscale Italian restaurant, and some information about schools. I thought we should discuss. Over pasta and garlic bread at the small kitchen table, Ethan watched Sophie chattering about her day, struck again by how quickly she'd accepted him into her life. Children's resilience was remarkable, or perhaps it was simply that she'd been waiting for him all along without knowing it. After Sophie went to her room to finish homework, Ethan spread several brochures across the table. These are the top private schools in the city, he explained. I've arranged interviews at each one. They've agreed to consider mid-year admission given the circumstances. Melissa examined one glossy brochure, eyes widening at the tuition figure. These schools cost more than a college education. Cost isn't a factor. Ethan dismissed. Wellington Academy is my first choice. I attended as a boy, and their STEM program would nurture Sophie's scientific interests. She has friends at her current school, a routine, stability. She deserves the best education available, Ethan countered. These schools have connections that will benefit her throughout life. Melissa set down the brochure. I met with Victoria today. The abrupt change of subject caught Ethan off guard. What? Why? She invited me to offer a solution to our situation. Melissa's voice remained calm, but her eyes held challenge. She suggested we relocate to another city, with generous financial compensation, of course. Ethan's expression darkened. I knew nothing about this. I believe you. But it raises questions about what happens when your lives fully merge. Will Sophie be welcome at family gatherings, holiday celebrations, or will she remain your separate obligation kept at a convenient distance? That's not going to happen, Ethan said firmly. Sophie is my daughter. She'll be part of every aspect of my life. And Victoria, does she share that vision? Ethan looked away. Victoria is adjusting. That's diplomatic. Melissa leaned forward. Ethan, I need to know your long-term intentions. These schools, the financial support, it all feels like you're trying to reshape Sophie's life to fit your world, without considering what she might lose in the process. I'm trying to give her opportunities I didn't even know she existed to receive until now, he replied, frustration edging his voice, and I appreciate that. But Sophie needs consistency and emotional security more than prestigious schools or connections. She can have both. Melissa took a deep breath. Let me ask you something. If your wedding goes forward as planned, how does Sophie fit into that picture? Have you and Victoria discussed it? The question hung between them. Ethan had deliberately avoided that conversation with Victoria, focusing instead on immediate concerns. The truth was, every time he raised the subject of Sophie, Victoria changed the topic or made vague assurances that everything would work out. We're figuring it out, he finally said. That's not reassuring, Ethan. The door to Sophie's room creaked open. She stood in the doorway in her pajamas, clutching her teddy bear. Are you fighting about me? She asked in a small voice. Ethan and Melissa exchanged startled glances. No, sweetheart, Melissa said quickly. We're just discussing grown-up things. Sophie approached the table, looking at the school brochures. Am I changing schools? Ethan knelt beside her. We're exploring some options, schools with advanced science programs you might enjoy. But what about my friends and Ms. Johnson's class? You could make new friends, Ethan offered, and I'm sure the teachers would be excellent. Sophie looked between them, her young face surprisingly serious. Do I get to choose? The simple question landed with unexpected weight. In their adult struggle for control, neither had considered simply asking Sophie what she wanted. Ethan met Melissa's gaze over Sophie's head, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Whatever their differences, Sophie's well-being had to come first. Yes, Ethan said softly. You get a say in this too. The Reed Enterprises executive boardroom fell silent as Ethan concluded his presentation. The quarterly reports showed record profits, yet the tension in the room was palpable. Bernard Winthrop, the eldest board member and longtime family friend, removed his glasses slowly. Impressive numbers, Ethan. But I think we need to address the elephant in the room. The press coverage of your personal situation has investors nervous. Ethan had been expecting this. My private life has no bearing on my ability to run this company. Ordinarily, I'd agree, said Catherine Zhao, head of international operations. But the timing is problematic. With the Westlake merger announcement, next week any instability in leadership raises concerns. There is no instability, Ethan replied firmly. I discovered I have a daughter. I'm taking responsibility. End of story. Bernard leaned forward. The board fully supports your commitment to your child. However, the tabloids are having a field day with speculation about this Melissa Parker woman. The narrative that she deliberately targeted you is false, Ethan interrupted, and my legal team is addressing those stories. Perhaps interjected Victoria's father, Harold Blackwell, who held a significant stake in the company. But perception matters in business as much as reality. The uncertainty around your personal life, including the postponement of your wedding, raises questions about your focus. Ethan felt a flare of anger. Victoria had told her father about the postponement before they'd even finalized that decision. "My focus is exactly where it needs to be," he said coldly. "The merger is proceeding on schedule. Our financials are stronger than ever. If anyone has concerns about my leadership, I invite them to review the 27% growth we've achieved this quarter." After the meeting, Harold cornered Ethan in the hallway. "Victoria is devastated about the wedding postponement. That's between Victoria and me." "Is it? When it affects my daughter's happiness and potentially destabilizes a company I've invested heavily in?" Harold's voice lowered. "Listen to me carefully, Ethan. You can be a father to this child without derailing your life. Set up a trust fund, arrange visitation, but maintain boundaries. Men in our position always do." Ethan's expression hardened. "I'm not interested in being a part-time father. Your dedication is admirable, if misguided. Just remember, the board is watching closely. Don't let personal matters cloud your judgment." Later that afternoon, Ethan sat in his office reviewing school applications for Sophie. Despite his initial push for Wellington Academy, he'd agreed to visit several schools with both Sophie and Melissa to find the right fit. It was a compromise, but one that felt surprisingly right. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Reed, Ms. Parker is here to see you. She says it's urgent." Ethan stood immediately. "Send her in." Melissa entered looking flustered, her cheeks flushed as if she'd been running. "What's wrong? Is Sophie okay?" Ethan asked. "She's fine. She's at school." Melissa placed her phone on his desk, opened to a news website. But this just broke. The headline made his blood run cold. "Reed Enterprises heirs mother questions paternity claim." The article quoted Diana Reed expressing concerns about the convenient timing of Sophie's appearance and suggesting that further verification beyond initial tests might be prudent before my son makes irrevocable decisions. "Your mother is demanding additional DNA testing," Melissa said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Sophie's teacher saw this article. The other children are already asking questions." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I had no idea she would do this." "Really? Because it seems everyone in your life is determined to deny Sophie's existence or minimize her importance. That's not fair, isn't it? Your fiancé offers to pay me to leave town. Your board questions your leadership. Now your mother publicly casts doubt on Sophie's paternity." Melissa's eyes flashed. "This is exactly why I was reluctant to let you into our lives. Sophie is just beginning to trust that you'll be there for her. And now she'll hear that her own grandmother thinks she's an imposter." Ethan reached for his phone. "I'll handle this." "How? Another press release? More damage control?" Melissa shook her head. "Sophie needs stability, not drama. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe a clean break would be better for everyone." The suggestion hit Ethan like a physical blow. "You don't mean that." "I don't know what I mean anymore." Melissa's voice cracked slightly. "I just know I can't let Sophie keep getting hurt." As she turned to leave, Ethan realized with sudden clarity that he was at a crossroads. The carefully constructed life he'd built, the company, the social standing, the strategic relationships, was colliding with something far more fundamental: his daughter's well-being and happiness. And for the first time in his driven, ambitious life, the choice seemed startlingly clear. Ethan's car pulled up to the sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, where he'd grown up. The Reed family mansion stood imposing as ever, its colonial architecture a testament to old money and tradition. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Melissa asked from the passenger seat, gripping her purse tightly. "No," Ethan admitted, "but it's necessary." In the back seat, Sophie gazed wide-eyed at the mansion. "Your house is like a castle." "It's my mother's house," Ethan corrected gently. "I grew up here." After Diana's public statement questioning Sophie's paternity, Ethan had made an executive decision. Instead of more press releases or legal maneuvers, he would confront the situation directly. He'd insisted that his mother meet Sophie and Melissa in person. Diana Reed opened the front door herself, elegant at 65 in a tailored pantsuit, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her smile froze when she saw Melissa and Sophie exiting the car with Ethan. "I wasn't expecting company," she said pointedly. "That was clear from your press statement," Ethan replied, guiding Sophie forward. "Mother, this is Sophie, my daughter, and this is Melissa Parker, who has raised her since birth." Diana's gaze swept over Sophie, lingering on her eyes, the same distinctive green as Rebecca's, the same shape as Ethan's when he was young. "Come in," she finally said, stepping aside. "Harrison can bring tea to the solarium." The grand foyer echoed with their footsteps as they followed Diana through the house. Sophie stayed close to Melissa, suddenly shy in these overwhelming surroundings. In the sun-drenched solarium, surrounded by Diana's prized orchid collection, they sat in uncomfortable silence until a butler served tea and small cakes. "Sophie," Diana began, her voice softer than before, "do you like school?" "Yes, ma'am," Sophie answered politely. "I especially like science and art." Ethan was the same way. Always building things, taking them apart to see how they worked. A ghost of a smile touched Diana's lips. "He once disassembled my favorite clock. I was furious until I realized he'd actually fixed the mechanism." For the next 15 minutes, Diana asked Sophie gentle questions about her interests and activities. The child gradually relaxed, even accepting a tour of the orchid collection while Ethan and Melissa remained seated. When Sophie was occupied examining a particularly striking purple bloom, Diana turned to them, her voice low. "She's unmistakably yours, Ethan. I see it now. You could have seen it weeks ago if you'd bothered to meet her before issuing public statements," he replied coldly. "I was protecting you. After what Victoria told me about Ms. Parker's background." "Victoria had no right," Melissa interrupted, unable to contain herself. "My background is irrelevant. I've raised Sophie with love and values, despite financial struggles." Diana assessed, Melissa with new interest. "You clearly care for the child. She's my daughter in every way that matters." Ethan placed his hand over Melissa's. "Mother, I need you to understand something. Sophie is my priority now. I've postponed the wedding, because Victoria and I need to resolve how Sophie fits into our future. The board is concerned about my focus, but I've never been more clear about what matters." Diana's expression softened marginally. "You're serious about this?" "Completely. And I won't tolerate anyone, family included, causing Sophie distress or questioning her place in my life." Diana took a measured sip of tea. "I suppose I'll need to issue a retraction, a full apology," Ethan corrected, "and announce your delight in discovering you have a granddaughter." Later, as they prepared to leave, Diana approached Sophie again. "I have something for you." She handed the child a small jewelry box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny orchid charm. "It was Ethan's grandmother's," Diana explained. "Family tradition dictates it passes to the firstborn daughter of each generation." Sophie's eyes widened. "It's for me?" "If you'd like it," Diana said, her voice gentler than Melissa had heard all day. On the drive back to the city, Sophie fell asleep clutching the bracelet box. Melissa glanced at Ethan, who seemed deep in thought. "Your mother surprised me," she admitted quietly. "She surprised me too." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "But it's just the beginning. There are still many battles ahead." "Victoria?" Melissa asked, though she already knew the answer. Ethan nodded grimly. "She's been avoiding my call since I postponed the wedding. But we can't move forward until we have an honest conversation about Sophie's place in our lives. And if she can't accept it?" Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror at his sleeping daughter. "Then she's not the right partner for me anymore." Victoria waited in Ethan's penthouse, a glass of wine in her perfectly manicured hand. The engagement ring on her finger caught the light as she drummed her fingers against the arm of the sofa. When the elevator doors opened, she straightened, prepared for battle. "You've been avoiding me," Ethan said, stepping into the living room. "I needed time to think." Victoria set down her glass. I understand you want to be a father to Sophie. I respect that, but this situation has spiraled completely out of control. My mother met Sophie today, Ethan said, loosening his tie. She's retracting her statement and publicly acknowledging her as my daughter. Victoria's expression tightened. How wonderful. Another piece of your life rearranged to accommodate your instant family. Sophie is my daughter, Victoria, not an accommodation. What about us? What about our plans? Victoria stood, frustration evident in every line of her body. We were supposed to be married in 6 weeks. Now everything's on hold while you play house with Melissa and Sophie. I'm not playing anything. I'm being a father. You can be a father without dismantling our relationship. Victoria's composure cracked. You've postponed our wedding. You're constantly at Melissa's apartment. You're letting a 6-year-old dictate your schedule. That 6-year-old is my child. And what am I? Victoria demanded. The inconvenient fiancé who doesn't fit your new narrative. Ethan sighed heavily. I never meant to hurt you, but I need to know Sophie feels secure and accepted in my life. And what about me? Where do I fit? Victoria paced the room. Your mother called me today, suggested I should be more understanding of your new priorities. She shouldn't have done that, but she did. And the board members are questioning if our relationship is even stable anymore. Victoria's voice lowered. Harold thinks you're having second thoughts about more than just the wedding date. Ethan met her gaze directly. Are you more concerned about losing me or losing your position as the future Mrs. Reed? The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. How dare you, Victoria whispered, after everything we've built together. Answer the question, Victoria. If there were no company, no social standing, no business advantages to our marriage, would you still want me? Victoria's silence spoke volumes. I thought so, Ethan said quietly. I think we both know this isn't working anymore. Victoria twisted the engagement ring off her finger and placed it on the coffee table with deliberate care. I deserved better than this, Ethan. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Ethan felt an unexpected lightness. The path forward was suddenly clearer than it had been in weeks. Tomorrow would bring challenges, explaining to the board, weathering, the inevitable press coverage. But tonight he felt free. He picked up his phone and dialed Melissa's number. Victoria and I ended our engagement, Ethan said, his voice calm as he sat across from Melissa at a quiet cafe near her apartment. They'd arranged to meet while Sophie was at her Saturday morning art class. Melissa set down her coffee cup, surprised by the directness of his statement. I'm sorry, Ethan. Don't be. It was necessary. He gazed out the window briefly. We wanted different things. Sophie made that clear. I hope you don't resent Sophie for— Never, he interrupted firmly. She didn't cause this. She revealed what was already there. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. I've been thinking, Ethan continued. Sophie's been visiting Wellington twice a week as part of their trial program. She seems to be thriving there. Melissa nodded. She loves the science lab, talks about it constantly. The commute is difficult from your current apartment. We manage. Ethan leaned forward. I found a condo near the school. 3 bedrooms, dorm and building, excellent security. It's in both your names. Ethan, I can't accept. It's not charity, Melissa. It's for Sophie. His eyes met hers, and maybe for us too. Her heart skipped a beat. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to see where this goes. Not just co-parenting, but more. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. If you're willing. Melissa felt a warmth spreading through her chest, unexpected but not unwelcome. I think I am. Outside, snowflakes began to fall, dusting the city in white. A fresh start, just like they were discussing. We should take it slow, she said, for Sophie's sake. Ethan smiled, genuinely happy for perhaps the first time since she'd met him. I've spent my life rushing. I think slow sounds perfect. 6 months later, Central Park bloomed with spring flowers. Sophie ran ahead on the path, her new school uniform replaced by jeans and a t-shirt for the weekend. Her dark curls bounced as she raced toward the playground, calling back to Ethan and Melissa, who walked hand in hand behind her. "She has so much energy," Ethan remarked, watching his daughter climb confidently up the jungle gym. "Always has," Melissa replied with a smile. Even as a baby, she was constantly moving. The past half year had brought profound changes to all their lives. Melissa and Sophie had moved into the condo near Wellington Academy, where Sophie was thriving academically. Ethan had restructured his work schedule to be home by dinner most nights, often helping with homework or simply enjoying family time. The press had eventually lost interest in their story once the initial scandal faded, especially after Diana Reid hosted a lavish party, formally introducing Sophie as her granddaughter. The society pages had moved on to fresher gossip, leaving them to build their relationship in relative peace. "The board meeting went well yesterday," Ethan said, guiding Melissa to a bench with a clear view of the playground. "Third quarter in a row of record growth. I'm not surprised. You seem more focused now, not less." "I am." He squeezed her hand. "Turns out having personal fulfillment makes me better at my job, not worse. Who would have thought?" Melissa laughed softly. Certainly not Victoria. Victoria had relocated to London shortly after the broken engagement, taking a position with a rival company. The business world had expected her to use insider knowledge against Reed Enterprises, but surprisingly, she'd maintained a professional distance, even sending Sophie a birthday card last month. "Have you heard from Rebecca's parents?" Ethan asked. Melissa nodded. "They're coming to visit next month. They want to thank you for the trust fund you established in Rebecca's name." It was the right thing to do. The scholarship will help young women pursue medical research on maternal health conditions. Rebecca would have approved. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Sophie make friends with another child on the swings. The ease between them had developed gradually, built on mutual respect and shared love for their daughter. "I've been thinking," Ethan said finally. "Remember when I said we should take things slow?" "I do. 6 months feels sufficiently slow." He turned to face her. "Sophie asked me yesterday if we were going to be a real family soon." Melissa's heart quickened. "What did you tell her?" "That I needed to ask you first." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. No grand gesture, no public display. Just the two of them on a park bench with their daughter playing nearby. "This isn't because of Sophie," he said quietly, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "It's because somewhere between DNA tests and school tours, board meetings, and bedtime stories, I fell in love with you, Melissa. Your strength, your integrity, your heart. You make me want to be better. As a father, as a man, as a partner." Tears welled in Melissa's eyes. "Are you sure? Your world is so different from mine." "Not anymore," he smiled. "You and Sophie are my world now. The rest is just context." From the playground, Sophie spotted them and waved enthusiastically. They waved back, united in their love for her. "So," Ethan continued, "would you consider making our unconventional family official?" Melissa looked at the ring, then at Sophie, and finally into Ethan's hopeful eyes. She thought of the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate job interview to co-parenting to this moment of possibility. "Yes," she said simply. "I would." As Sophie ran toward them, sensing something important was happening, Melissa reflected on how life's greatest challenges often led to its greatest gifts. 6 years ago, she had promised her dying friend to love and protect a baby girl. Now that promise had expanded to include a family she never expected to find. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger just as Sophie reached them, throwing her arms around them both. "Are we going to be together forever now?" Sophie asked, her green eyes bright with hope. "Yes, sweetheart," Ethan answered, pulling both Melissa and Sophie close. "Forever." In that perfect moment, the past with all its pain and misunderstandings faded away. What remained was simply love, complicated, unexpected, and beautifully complete.